All right, good morning, everyone. It is the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Kaylee Hansen. I'm a pre-sale and business solutions consultant with SVA, and joining me today is Austin, a customer success manager as well. So it's nice to have you all here. Today's webinar topic will be all about the theme of proactive accounting. So we'll be doing a three-part series around the topic of proactive accounting. The first part will be this month, and then February and March will be parts 2 and 3 as well. So part 1 will really focus on dynamic financial reporting and financial task automation. So we'll get into more of a detailed agenda, but before we get started, if it's your first time, welcome. If it's not your first time, welcome back. It's good to see you again. You probably know the drill already, but if you have any questions that come up during the webinar today, please feel free to drop them within the chat. Austin will be monitoring the chat, and then we'll also have a designated Q&A session at the end. So again, feel free to drop any questions you have, and we'll make sure to try to get to those at the end as well. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So walking through our agenda today, first we'll spend a little bit of time within the slide deck just reviewing some of the financial reporting components. So we'll take a look at what those components are, recap those for anyone who needs the additional review. And then we'll get into a demo. We'll take a look at some of those components that we discuss, and then we'll run through a demo scenario of reporting based on unit sets. So we'll go ahead and create a new unit set in Acumatica for financial reporting, and we'll see how that can help drive some of that dynamic financial reporting. Next, we'll transition a bit into some of the task automation. So we'll highlight various areas today, including things like journal transaction shortcuts. So things like copy, paste, templating, uploading from Excel, that sort of thing. We'll walk through things like recurring entries, allocations, and deferred revenue as well. So a little sneak peek into some of those tips and tricks related to the journal transaction side. And then we'll wrap up today with a little bit more basic task automation throughout the software. So things like business events and automation schedules. We'll highlight a couple examples of those as well. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and transition here. So before we get into the software, I just wanted to do a little bit of a component review relating to financial reporting in Acumatica. So one, the first kind of definition we'll walk through is account classes. So account classes group together your GL accounts really for grouping, sorting, and filtering. So pretty straightforward there. Where they come into play in terms of the reporting side is they can help facilitate easy report building by calling out the account class rather than each individual account, for example. So if you're adding a new account within your chart of accounts, instead of having to go and update various financial statements, you could kind of bypass that by assigning it to that account class, and then that financial statement could call out that account class specifically. So it can help facilitate some of that easy report building. The next is the report definition. So this is pretty straightforward, kind of sounds exactly as it's named, but it's really the definition of the report. So it helps specify the data sources, the layout, filtering, sorting, and formatting. And really the important part here is the report definition is made up of row sets, column sets, and then unit sets. So what are each of those? Again, pretty intuitive naming here, but row sets would specify the individual rows within the financial report itself. So it would represent what data is in each row, what it's named, how it's calculated, and how it starts to appear on your report itself. And a big advantage of row sets is that row sets can be built out once and then reused across multiple different reports. So this really starts to save time and effort when building additional reports. We'll take a look at some examples of that, how we can have the same row set being used across multiple reports within Acumatica. And then column sets, as you'd expect, would be kind of the flip side of that. So the configuration of the columns within the financial report, the type of data, the type of periods and calculations that are being displayed. And then column sets could be reused or added onto for various report build out as well. And then lastly, in the example we'll really walk through in depth today is the unit sets. So unit sets goes beyond kind of the traditional row and column sets to provide additional granularity or a hierarchy, so to say, when organizing data within your various reports. So it can take kind of a step further to group together different data from additional data sources. And so some examples of this could be, grouping together branches, grouping together departments, product lines, etc. So that will come into play as we take a look in the software, but really kind of 5 main definitions we just wanted to orient you to before we actually take a look at it. All right, so with that, I'm going to go into Acumatica. And Austin, give me kind of the cue that you can see my screen here. Perfect.
I'll put it over here.
Awesome. All right, so I'm in Acumatica. I'm going to go ahead and go into the finance module. And when I go into this module, we'll see kind of the far right preferences here are where all of those definitions sit. So the account classes, report definitions, row sets, and column sets, and unit sets. So I'll focus today on this profit and loss statement. I'll kind of orient you to how I have it set up currently. Then we'll go ahead, take a look at some of those components, and then we'll run through that process of creating a new unit set specifically for a profit and loss statement. So I'm going to run my report, and this is what mine kind of looks like within my environment. So here, as you'd expect, we have the row sets, the column sets at the top, and then those values are feeding in based on that setup. Up here, whenever I have this grouping icon, this is where a unit set is set up within the financial report. So if I click into this, this is how I have my unit set set up currently. So in this example, I have it based on different branches within my organization. So I have a Texas branch, for example, a Wisconsin branch, and you'll notice that as I toggle between these various trees, so to say, or this different hierarchy on the left-hand side, it's going to update that information within that statement. So I don't have to rerun this report anytime I want to see it specifically for Texas, specifically for Wisconsin, or this holding company as a whole. Instead, I can build it within my unit set, and then I can toggle between those within my financial statement. So that's what I have it set up so far. We'll kind of take a look at the back end of that and the setup there, and then we'll change it, create a new unit set, and see how that would be reflected within the report. So we'll go over to my report definitions. And so this is the one I've been working with, this profit and loss. So pretty straightforward here, exactly what we talked about in that slide deck, some of the definition behind it. And then really it's made up of a row set, a column set, and then optionally a unit set. And then there's additional information that you could have relating to where you want this displayed within Acumatica, which workspace, what you want that called, etc. And if I go back to all of my report definitions, I have this just sorted here, but you can see those row sets being reused. So all of my different profit and loss statements, quarterly, by product, annual comparison, monthly, all of these are leveraging that same row set here. So again, row sets have that advantage of being built out once for certain types of reports and then reused for variations of it as well. All right, I'm going to go to my unit sets now. And here I have branches set up. So this new branch is the unit set I had within my profit and loss statement. And so this is just the foundation of what's currently built. So I can kind of toggle these on and off, but really I have all of them. So all of the different companies and branches grouped together. Then I have my holding company, which is made up of these 2 branches. My power energy company made up of that single branch. And then my services company made up of East and West. And that would match kind of my hierarchy of those different companies and branches at the top. So pretty straightforward example. But now let's say, you know what, I really want to see a profit and loss by department, but I also have multiple different departments that kind of roll up into different business units, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new unit set in this case to reflect that information that I want to see. So before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and open up my sub-accounts. And so here I have a list of different departments, as you can see. So I could build a unit set based on individual departments, but then in this scenario, I also want to group those together into maybe back office or admin different kind of units that pull together various departments in this scenario. So I'm going to go back to my unit sets. I'm going to create a new one. And we'll just label this new department rollup. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then I can start building out kind of this tree. So in this case, this is just going to be all my departments as the top layer. From there, I'm going to go ahead and build out, okay, what's going to make up all of those? And so in this case, I want kind of 3 different grouping mechanisms separate from those departments within my sub-account structure. But this might be, I want admin, maybe we'll call this strategy and growth. And then this might be logistics in this case. So now you'll see that tree start to build. So I have my consolidated at the top, administrative, the logistics, and then the strategy and growth. And for each one, I'm going to pull together various departments that make up that hierarchy. So I'll go to my admin first, and this is where I can start to pull various data sources. So in this case, I'm going to pull it from what I have within my sub-accounts. So I want admin to be made up of finance, for example. So we'll give this a code. And then also want this to be pulled, system management will make up this kind of admin. We'll go ahead and save that. So you see I can get granular in terms of different layers within my unit set. And then once I save this, we'll kind of see what it looks like within that profit and loss statement directly. So that looks good. Now I'm going to go to kind of the logistics side, and we're going to pull additional sources here. So in this case, this might just be my operations. And purchasing, for example. Go ahead and save that. And as you'd expect, we can continue to do this. So we'll kind of add this last one here. This will be made up of my consulting department and maybe my sales and marketing department. Perfect. Now I can go ahead and save that. And while I'm still in this screen, if I were to kind of add additional row, you can start to see within that data source column, the different types of data I can pull in. So I can start pulling in this case, things that I have within my sub-accounts, any branches, various accounts, companies, etc. So different types of data you can pull in. And then again, this is kind of grouping them together for reporting purposes. So I can start to roll those up in more of a tree view. So here's what I have set up. And now I'm going to go ahead and add this to my profit and loss statement. Oops, let me get back here. And so I could always copy this report, kind of create a new one, change that unit set. In this case, I'm just going to use my report I have built out already. And then I'm going to change this to be that new department rollup. I'm going to save it. And then anytime I make changes, I can go ahead and preview that report. So we'll preview what it looks like. Give that a second to load, taking into account that new unit set that I just created. Perfect. I'll run that report. And here, if I make this a little bit bigger, we'll see that unit set has come into play. So I have all my departments consolidated at the top, And then I have various administrative, finance, system management. Some of these don't have a lot of data in it yet, but you'll see it's going to start to pull some of those together. So I have my consulting versus my sales and marketing, and then strategy and growth will pull those two together into that view. So again, I'm never coding directly to strategy and growth or administrative, but rather just creating this unit set so that in the report view, I can view that data rolled up into that strategy and growth section, for example. So it's kind of one example of how we can start to leverage unit sets for various reports. A lot more there, but just giving you guys kind of a glimpse into what's possible. All right, so I'm going to transition a little bit into some of those shortcuts or task automation tools, specifically relating to the journal transaction side. So I'm going to go into my journal transactions. And a lot of these that I'll kind of recap briefly at the beginning will be tools that I'm sure a lot of you are using, but always just want to reinforce in case you aren't, because they can make hopefully your jobs a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new journal transaction. And once I do, I'll point out a couple of different features. So one, the copy and paste. Remember, this is a feature not only on the journal transaction side, but system-wide. So anytime I have transactions, I could copy and paste those transactions. So we'll walk through that. And then I can also always upload files or records from a file. So I'll go ahead and do that. And so this might be beneficial if you have multiple different lines that you want to bring in. You can pull it in from, in this case, an Excel file. I'm going to insert all these records. And then what this is doing is it's matching those column names within my Excel sheet on the left-hand side to the property names within Acumatica. So in this case, all of these are matching, except I didn't name this the same. So I'm going to go ahead and manually match it, press OK. And once I did, it just pulled in whatever I had in that Excel sheet. So that's kind of one mechanism of getting data into the system. Again, kind of a shortcut that maybe a lot of you are using, hopefully, but if not, just want to re-highlight some of those components. And then as we talked about as well, I could copy this, create a new transaction and paste it. Could obviously kind of tweak anything that needed to be adjusted, but that's available system-wide as well. Same thing with the idea of templates. So any journal transaction could be saved as a template, and then I could paste that. So in this case, a rental expense, maybe something that is on a monthly basis, for example. I could go ahead and save that journal transaction as a template. And then every month, for example, I could pull that in. Maybe those amounts are changing, so I could go ahead and make those adjustments as well. So just a couple of shortcuts there that we like to remember that are available to you in case you're not using those today. Going off of the templates, we also have the idea of true recurring transactions. So again, if we have any transactions that are recurring, that meaning they're the same each month, we can set up a recurring transaction profile. And so this will designate things like a start and end date, as well as a frequency of how often these recurring transactions should occur. So in this case, I just have a monthly advertising expense. It's going to be a fixed amount every month on the 15th of the month. So you can see that based on my settings at the top. And then you'll see it's just $1,500 each month. And so if you look at my generated documents, we'll see, as we would expect, that ran on the 15th of each month, starting from August. So that's kind of one method there. Again, we don't have to create those transactions manually each time, but we can set up a recurring transaction profile, and those can run on a schedule to auto-create that GL batch. And I could take a look at what this looks like as well. Perfect. Now we'll get into some of the allocations. So again, a little bit more in terms of the automation side, how we can start to automate some of these allocations as well. So I'm going to go into my utility allocation by department example. And so once we set up various allocation profiles, it's going to work a little bit similarly to the recurring transaction, and that you set up the profile once, and then it's going to automatically run those allocations and create those journal transactions for you. So in this case, I have an allocation set up, and this allocation profile is going to dictate what's my allocation method and then how do I want to distribute that. So this is a pretty basic example saying, okay, I just want to distribute something by a percentage, by a weight, that's more of a fixed amount, or you could be a little bit more dynamic as well. So if I had this set up to be by the account period to date or year to date, I could set that up. And what that would do is pull from something like a base ledger to then allocate proportionally based on that. So an example of that scenario would be more of allocation by headcount, for example. So we may track headcount within a statistical ledger, and then we can set this distribution method up to pull from that, whatever exists in that today, it can proportionally distribute based off of that. So we'll get back into kind of this basic example here, but once we set up that allocation method, then we can start to see, okay, what's the source account? So anything going into this utilities expenses account is going to allocate across to these destination accounts. So in this case, this is a fixed percent, so it's going to say, okay, 40% of whatever was within those utilities, put that into the finance department, put 10% into the consulting department, 30% into sales and marketing, and so on. So we could tweak these if those are changing as well. But this is, again, more of a fixed percentage here. And then what this is going to do is anything that's coded to that utilities account, again, it's going to automatically distribute evenly based on these weights I have set up. So I have an allocation history. We can see what was already ran in the past. So anything that's allocated can be viewed within this allocation profile. And then if we drill down, it's going to drill us over to that journal transaction as well. So here you'll see there was a $500 utility charge, and then the allocation automatically created that distribution across to the various departments. So I can go ahead and run this live. I'm going to go ahead and create an AP bill for those utilities. It's going to hit that account, and then we'll see when I run the allocation that it's going to automatically allocate that and create the corresponding journal transaction. So we'll use my Alt-A spender. We'll make this pretty simple. We'll do $1,000 utility so we can start to see that distribution. And then I'm going to make sure I'm coding this to my utilities account. Go ahead and save it. I'm going to remove this hold and release. Perfect. So now I'm going to go back to my finance module and I'm going to run these allocations. So I'm running these manually in this case, but as a reminder, and we'll kind of highlight this again at the end, any of these processing screens within Acumatica can be set up to run automatically on a schedule. So in this case, you could have your allocations running every night, every week, whatever that cadence may be, through this icon here. So again, all processing screens within Acumatica have this schedule button. And so this is where I could set up a cadence to say, hey, every week, every month, whatever the cadence again is, run those allocations. And what that's going to do is it's going to run those and automatically create that allocation batch. So I'm going to do it manually. I'm going to press process. Said one was processed, and then we'll see the last batch here. And I can drill down into that. So again, what that process did is it automatically created this journal transaction to, again, allocate that $1,000 of utilities across those different departments based on those weights I had set up within the profile. I could go ahead and release this as well. So kind of some shortcuts on the allocation side that automate that process a little bit further. And then the last kind of scenario we'll walk through will be relating to the deferred revenue side. So I'm going to go into my deferred revenue profile. And so this may or may not be a module many of you are using. If you're not interested in it, this will give kind of a high-level overview, but it's going to, again, see how we can start to automate that process a little bit. So a little bit of background before I run through a scenario. Here are my deferral codes. So I can have deferral codes set up. I can drill down into this This is, again, a basic scenario of just a 12-month evenly. And this is what it's going to do. It's going to say, what is the recognition method? So in this case, this is evenly by periods. And then I can also have how many times it will occur. And so this is a little bit of the core setup behind it. Again, I could have multiple different deferral codes with different recognition methods, but we'll kind of stick to this one today. This is kind of the first component. And then the next component I'll walk through in this scenario is just on this non-stock item. So I have some software that's kind of a subscription here. And when I drill down into it, I'll see this deferral tab, and that's where it's going to call out that specific deferral code. So that's what we'll use kind of as the basis for this scenario. And then I can go ahead and walk through creating an invoice. So I'm going to create an invoice for our USA bartending school. They are in desperate need of some software, so we're going to go ahead and invoice that. And we'll go ahead and add in that item. So again, that's the non-stock item that I just referred to. And then if I scroll over to the right here, we'll see that deferral code is being pulled in as well. And we'll just do 1 year of this subscription. And then maybe we'll add in a second item as well. This might be just an add-on, and we'll do 1 year for that as well. Press save. And same thing, that's going to be the same deferral code based on what I have set up on that non-stock item. All right, so now I'm going to toggle between these two line items, and you'll see that I can view the referrals. So if I click on this, we'll see what this looks like, but not a lot happened because I haven't released this transaction yet. So if I wanted to generate transactions before I release the actual invoice, I could do that to see what that breakout would look like. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just release this invoice. And once I do, I can go ahead and click that View Deferrals button again. And as we would expect, it's showing that breakdown here. So again, based on that deferral code, I can start to see that schedule. And then if I toggle to that next line item, that would look similar as well based on that. So that amount will change based on that non-stock item, but that cadence will look similar to the previous item. All right, so that's set up. And now I'm going to go ahead and go to my deferred revenue module, and I'm going to run the recognition. So this is, again, an automated process. I'll run it manually in this case, but this is something that we would have automated based on those automation schedules. So once I did that, we can see at the bottom are 2 new line items. So here I have on the 22nd, that software subscription 1 and that software subscription 2. So this is the first date that it's running. So again, we'll see that amount broken up based on that deferral code. I'm going to go ahead and process this. And once I do, what that did is it created that journal transaction for both of those items. So here we'll see it's coming from the deferred revenue module. And again, once that process is ran, it's going to create that journal transaction for the deferred revenue. So a little bit more automation on the deferred revenue side, which can be a nice tool, especially if you do this a lot. All right. So just to kind of recap what we went through, we talked through a couple of shortcuts related to the journal transactions, hopefully tools that you're leveraging today, but all of those that we talked about in the beginning. So things like saving as a template, recurring transactions, upload from Excel on the entry side, those are available not just in the journal transactions themselves, but across the system. So things like your payables module, your receivables module, those are all available on that side as well. Then we walked to the allocations and recurring transactions. So both of those can be set up as profiles to help automate that journal transaction related to it. And then same thing on the deferred revenue side. All right. So now we'll kind of transition one last time into some more automation tools that are, again, system-wide, but help automate some of the tasks on the finance side as well. So we talked through the automation schedules, but just to reiterate, those can be set up on all processing screens within Acumatica. So anywhere where you have this processes, anything underneath can be set on a schedule. And they typically would be for a lot of these scenarios. So again, I'm not manually running allocations, but it's going to run automatically for me. So anytime those are created, it's going to go ahead and create those journal transactions for me. So automation schedules are available throughout the system. So if I went into my payables module, again, anything within these menu items can be ran automatically versus having to go in and process those manually. And then the second tool we like to highlight, especially in the topic of automation, would relate to Acumatica's business events as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the business events screen. And we'll see this recurring as kind of a theme throughout this Proactive Accountant series, since this really is a way to help automate certain specific notifications or activities and that sort of thing. But here I have some business events set up. So what business events do is if I drill down into one of these, it's going to create some sort of event based on some sort of action or schedule. So in this case, I have it set up to trigger by a schedule. It could also be triggered by a record change or by an action. But this trigger by schedule is really just saying, okay, look at all of my AR invoices, for example. And when the due date is today minus 15, so that means it's not due yet, but it's due in 15 days, send an automated notification. In this case, an email notification. And this is going to be sent to your customer to remind them, hey, customer, again, it's pulling that information dynamically. You have an invoice, here's your number, it's due in 15 days, what's the due date, and what's the balance of that? So these are all configurable in terms of the messaging side, as well as the business event logic itself. And so what this business event will do is it's going to run anytime that there's something that's due in 15 days, in this case, an invoice, send out a notification to our customers to remind them. So that's kind of one scenario. And then it could also be not just sent for external notifications, but for internal notifications as well. So if I go back to my all records here, I have an example set up on the purchase order side, but this could very well be something like an AP bill as well. So this is saying anytime the status is changing on a purchase order, again, or an AP bill, could be set up similarly. So anytime the status on that record changes to pending approval, so it's taken off hold, now it's routed to someone for approval. Anytime that happens, then trigger this action. And in this case, it's an email notification to an internal team member to say, hey, it's time for you to go ahead and approve this. And so this can really help automate the communication both internally and externally with your team to help kind of move the process along. So instead of having to manually walk over to someone, get an approval, call a customer up in that earlier example to tell them their invoice is coming due, these can help automate some of that and then really help on the financial side as well. But again, these business events are system-wide, so we could set them up really for any area within Acumatica, trigger various actions to come from those as well. All right. So that was kind of part one of our Proactive Accountant journey. So I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen here. And now we have a couple of next steps. So I don't think there's any questions in the queue, but if you have any last minute questions, feel free to drop those in. But otherwise, you can kind of reach out to us a couple of different ways. So if you liked what you saw here, maybe you want to explore any of those areas further. You're not using allocations today, or you're not using deferred revenue today, and you want some assistance in how you should navigate that, evaluate that, or set it up, definitely reach out to us. So you can reach out to either myself or Austin, we're always available, or you can reach out to us through that contact@sva.com and tech support@sva.com as well. Again, this was part 1 of 3. So next in February, that's the next webinar, February 19th, we'll be walking through more of the cash management, AP and AR tools, again, around this idea of automation, proactiveness, etc. So if you're interested in seeing part 2, you can scan that QR code and register now. And again, that will be on February 19th on those 3 topics. And then all of our webinars are posted on our YouTube, so those can be accessed at SVA Consulting on YouTube under Acumatica webinars. And then that last little highlight there, we always like to encourage our customers to be active within the Acumatica community, see what other people are doing, post ideas and that sort of thing. And so you can always have access to that at community.acumatica.com. But with that, thank you all for joining us today. If you're kind of up north here, stay warm. I hope you guys all have a good rest of your week. Thank you.